I got out of the house last month to do a little bit of hummingbird photography, and I'll tell you what, I got what I think are some real wall hangers. I thought you might enjoy a little peek behind the scenes of how I took some of these shots. Let's go out in the field. Hola amigos, Greg Basco here in my home office in Costa Rica, and I'm really excited to present to you today the first episode of my new video series, In the Field with Me. You know, I hope to do a lot more of these over the coming years, and I have some new episodes coming up. So be sure to hit the like button and especially subscribe so that you're notified of new videos right here on my channel. You know, the next episodes are going to be right here in Costa Rica because pandemic. I'm not going to be traveling internationally until I'm vaccinated, which I think is a good idea for everybody, of course. But I had a really fun adventure last month at a place I love just about 40 minutes from my house here in Costa Rica called Catarata del Toro, or the Toro Waterfall. You can check them out here on Facebook and Instagram. It's run by my good friends Will and Donais, fantastic couple. A beautiful, beautiful place, lush cloud forest, an amazing waterfall, and of course lots of cool hummingbirds. I've done a lot of hummingbird photography over the years, and I've become fairly known as a guy who does really nice multi-flash hummingbird photography work in terms of making it look natural. It's something I really enjoy, and I've set this up for clients hundreds of times now, I think, and everybody's gotten some great shots, and I love these kind of pictures. But I wanted to do something different now that I had a chance to go out for my own photography, and I was lucky to have as my traveling partner my good friend Paulo Valerio, who's an ecologist and photographer, and my business partner in our photo tour company, Foto Verde Tours. Be sure to check us out. Just as soon as it's safe, we'll have workshops here in Latin America up and running again. I've had some ideas about doing some really cool hummingbird photos for a while on my own with some really different ideas, and Paulo had some ideas as well, which turned out to be really cool. So why don't you join us and check out our new episode, Crazy Hummingbird Photos from the Central Volcanic Mountain Range of Costa Rica. This episode took us to the beautiful cloud forests of the Caribbean slopes of the Central Volcanic Mountain Range and Bajos del Toro, where the waterfall is located. It is an amazing area. It's one of the wettest areas in Costa Rica and on the planet. Just look at that scenery. It's incredible. And it's characterized by lots of waterfalls. I think just in this one county there are about 30 or 40 waterfalls, crystal clear sapphire streams that are of volcanic origin, and of course really lush cloud forest vegetation. The winds around the world in general work this way. In temperate latitudes they blow from the west, and in the tropics they blow from the east, especially in the American tropics. So you have the trade winds coming across, and this is a big thing for Costa Rica's weather, because Costa Rica is divided in a roughly northwest to southeast fashion by a number of mountain ranges. And so as the trade winds blow this warm, moist air from the Caribbean, that air hits the land, hits the mountains, rises, cools, condenses, and dumps a lot of rain on the eastern side of the country, and especially the eastern mountain slopes. By the time that air passes over to the Pacific side, it's largely dry and bereft of humidity. As a result, the western side of Costa Rica, largely, especially the central and north part, is home to tropical dry forest. It's this cacti-studded forest that's home to scorpions and neotropical rattlesnakes. And on the eastern side, it's just a fiesta of biodiversity with orchids and hummingbirds. And so Paulo and I went to the Toro Waterfall to do our hummingbird photography. Since we live in different parts of the country, we decided to meet up at the waterfall. Paulo had a route that took him a long way through the capital and up over the mountains, and his trip started out pretty well, navigating the outskirts of the capital. Hey, look, a McDonald's. How about that? But pretty soon Paulo ran into the typical traffic jams that we have in and around the capital city of San Jose. And this is just life in the big city, right? But I, on the other hand, had a much more direct and shorter route just up over the Continental Divide from my town up in the mountains over to the waterfall. But I hit a traffic jam too, though of a slightly different kind. Nonetheless, we met up over at the waterfall, and as soon as we got there, we started to set up the bare bones of our kind of default multi-flash setup. Lots of light stands. I'm going to link to the lighting gear page at my Deep Green Photography website so you can see links to all of these things. But we set up kind of the basic, like I said, default things. So we were ready to go with lots of flashes, lots of arms to hold leaves and flowers. And then from there, we tweaked it to get a little crazier. Right, so our first setup was a little crazy and pretty low budget. You can see it doesn't look super pro. Some parts of it do. Nice Wimberley clamp, some nice Yongnuo flashes all over the place, nice green background back here. But what Paulo and I wanted to do with this setup was to produce super soft light, just like the cloudy light in the cloud forest that we're in right now. Even though we're in a restaurant, we're surrounded by cloud forest here in Costa Rica. So we wanted to reproduce that really soft, beautiful cloud forest light. And we wanted to do something a little different for multi-flash hummingbird photography, which was to produce only one catch light and one very soft catch light that looks, again, and goes hand in hand with that cloudy light. So here's what we did. We're shooting from back here. You can see Paulo's camera there in the background. We have a Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter lens. Zoom lenses are great for hummingbird photography. And we have Paulo's 5D SR camera, formerly mine. Awesome, awesome resolution and just fantastic to show off all the detail in hummingbird feathers. So great image quality. We're getting some really cool shots. And then what we have here is we have a flower. This is a flower in the Ericaceae, Ericaceae in Spanish, the tropical blueberry family, related to blueberries and cranberries. Great epiphytic plant that lots of, especially little hummingbird species like the black-bellied hummingbird and coppery-headed emerald love right in this cloud forest, and it's something they would feed on every day. So we're shooting from back here. We want to get some nice flashlight on here and some nice soft flashlight. So here's what we did. I brought a really nice sheet from home that we took off our guest bedroom, and I'm using this as a giant softbox to make a really, really large light source. Even though we have a large light source, so we have very soft shadows because we have very soft light, which is a function of the size of the light source and basically nothing else. But we need to have a little bit of fill light. We could have placed just a flash pointing right at the flower and plant. That would look a little harsh and it would produce a really noticeable catch light, second catch light. Nothing wrong with that. Usually you can take care of it in Photoshop or Lightroom, but again, we wanted to set the challenge for ourselves to make only one very natural looking catch light. So first we tried putting a softbox over this, bouncing it off an umbrella. That worked pretty well, but we still had a defined catch light in there. So our second little piece of DIY material here was something from my car, one of those windshield reflector things to keep the sun from heating up your car too much. Works great just to bounce a little of that main light back in and give us some soft fill without producing an extra catch light. So that's what we did. And we got some pretty nice photos. Check out this nice soft light. And look at the beautiful single natural looking catch light we got. I'm going to leave links down below for the bed sheet and the car windshield reflector so you can get my recommended ones. But seriously, we got some nice shots. It was a good little warm up. And then we moved on to something a bit more complicated.
Across this flower right here, which looks very, very good. As a matter of fact, it is going to allow us to do a very nice composition with it. So what is it? It's the flower of the passion plant or the passion flower, or passiflora. This specific species is Passiflora vitifolia. Vitifolia means leaf like a grapevine, and as you can see, sort of like resemble the shape of a grapevine. Now, passion flowers are hummingbird pollinated, which means we are going to be using a natural flower that hummingbirds would visit normally and naturally. This being a native species is even better. The name passion flower does not come from any type of romantic, of love related aspect, as you might think, being Latin Americans, etc. But it is in fact more related with religion. It is said that when the Spaniards first came to the Americas and ran into this flower, they saw some kind of a sign for them. Being very devoted Catholics, what they saw over here were some symbols, some signs that for them was a good omen. And that includes 10 petals, which were the 10 faithful apostles of Christ. There is a highly modified series of floral parts in here that resemble the crown of thorns that was used during the crucifixion. There are 5 stamens, which are related with the 5 wounds Christ received during the crucifixion. And here on top of the flower is the stigma, which is split into 3. To some people, it is a symbol of the Holy Trinity, but since they also look sort of like nails, they are also representing the 3 nails used during the crucifixion of Jesus. So as a whole, the plant is a very important symbol for practicing Catholics around the country, and this is exactly what the Spaniards saw on their arrival to the Americas.
All right, we have a really crazy setup going on behind me. We're going to use the passion flower we talked about earlier. We're going to cut it in just a few minutes because we're not quite ready to get started. We don't want it to wilt on us and again have to pick another flower because that would just be uncool, and we're cool. So what we have going on is this kind of dreamy, hopefully, this is how it's going to work out, this kind of dreamy, shallow depth of field. It's a look I really love out in the rainforest. And once in a while, with the perfect light, you can pull it off. Why don't we just go outside and do it with the passion flower vine instead of doing all this stuff kind of inside in this open rancho area? It's because we're not going to get the perfect light today. And we also love the challenge of trying to recreate what would be the perfect light. So we want this kind of shallow depth of field, dreamy look with a passion flower vine and a hummingbird coming to a passion flower against kind of a blue sky, which is pretty typical because those vines climb up into the canopy and that's how they grow, right? So what we're doing is we have right behind me some passion flower vine stems, little branches here. These are going to be the foreground. They're going to be out of focus, and we're lighting it just off to my left here with one flash, just to give it a little bit of light so it's not a complete silhouette. And then behind me farther, in the middle area, that's where our center stage is. That's where the action is going to happen. That's where we're going to place the flower. We're going to juice it up with some sugar water from the same feeders that they have right around here, with a sterilized syringe, by the way, which is actually really important so we don't carry around maybe viruses from another area of the country from other feeders to this area. So we always do that when we work with hummingbirds. But I have a big light in the back. That big softbox you see is a Godox softbox. So I have one flash in there. That's going to produce some really nice soft light. And then Paulo and I decided we'll try to go with just one catch light for the bird. Even though it's a multi-flash setup, we want to do one catch light only. So for our fill light, I actually have a big reflector over here rather than another flash. That's going to give us some nice soft fill light without producing another catch light in the eye. And then back behind, we have some more of these passion flower vine stems. And those are going to be out of focus as well, just to create even more depth in the scene. And then we have another flash on that just to light those up a little bit so they're not complete silhouettes. And then finally in the back, we have our background, which is a printed background of a photo that Paulo took looking through the vegetation up toward kind of a dark blue sky. It has some really cool kind of circular, specular, really soft specular highlights. So it has really cool bokeh in it. And that's the crazy setup we have going on. And so all the light in this picture is going to be provided by our flashes. It's a cloudy day here outside, and we're undercover. It's probably going to rain. And so we don't have much light in here at all. So we're using 1/200th of a second, a low ISO 200, I believe, and f5.6 or so. And without the flashes, that's going to give us a completely dark picture. So our flashes are going to provide the action-stopping power and the exact perfect light that we want. So check out the pictures we got. We're really happy with them. So these are looking really nice. I love this kind of blue sky background that Paulo had. And as I mentioned, even though you see these values here, f6.3, 1/200th, and ISO 200, you might be thinking, well, how did you stop the action? Again, it's because even at these values, there is no natural light hitting the sensor. So we're using f6.3, the widest aperture on Paulo's Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter lens. We're using that because we want to render things out of focus. But even there, we're completely underexposing the natural light and letting our flash do all the work. And so for some of these, we changed over to a warmer background, and I just love these shots. They have that dreamy feel that I like, and I love the dappled light that we were able to produce with our flash that looks soft and natural. You know, but it's easy to change things up. And we did that by just moving our flashes around a little bit, putting a white background for a high key look, and then putting a black background for a low key look. And now we're not worried about shooting through things. And look at that sumptuous light. Sumptuous, isn't it? That's a good way to describe it. But we stopped down to f11 because now we wanted a little more depth of field, and we're not worried about rendering some of the things out of focus. And again, I just love this. And it just took a few tweaks to the background and the positioning of the lights to change things. Now, what happens when the sun comes out and hits the set? A lot of multi-flash hummingbird photographers will do their best to shade the set then so they can avoid ghosting. I like to embrace ghosting, so I changed my exposure. I opened up to f8 and opened the shutter speed to 1/30th. So I have the natural light exposing properly for the moving wings, and you get this crazy blur. And then I have one or two flashes that Paulo and I set up, helping to render that color in the hummingbird and also to help with a little bit of sharpness. And just look at the details in here where, again, we just have this gorgeous light on the hummingbird, if I do say so myself, combined with this golden wing blur. And there's just a lot of craziness. I'm showing you these details more so that you can see them, on your smaller screen. We really liked, of course, the full frame vertical composition of this flower in the Gerania genus, which is the Cucurbitaceae. Check out that one. That's nuts, isn't it? Yeah, Cucurbitaceae, the cucumber family, even though I hate cucumbers. We'll call it the squash family, pumpkin family, melon family, anything but cucumber family. But just take a look at these. We absolutely love these pictures, and I hope you're enjoying them too. But again, the full frame vertical composition is where we thought, that this setup really shined. Now, I want to show you something with this next shot. This is a decent shot of a hermit, but it was behind the plane of focus. We're pre-focusing for these pictures. And with no sharpening, you can see that this picture is just out of focus, right? I thought, what could Topaz Sharpen AI do with this? It helped a little bit. What about Photoshop Smart Sharpen? That actually almost looks a little better, even though grainier in the wings. Maybe there's just no saving that photo. But after this, Paulo and I went outside and we started to work on another crazy setup that I'm going to tell you about right now.
This is a pretty cool setup. A few months ago, Paulo had this idea to try to photograph a hummingbird from below. So our camera looking up, just like we have here, and to get the hummingbird like straight on, but looking up from below it. First, Paulo thought we could do it in the kind of our little modified studio, like we do multi-flash hummingbird stuff, like a lot of people do multi-flash hummingbirds. And we thought, yeah, that could work. But then we thought, you know what? We're not really doing anything different then. We're just maybe putting a background above everything, but it's just not the same. So we thought, you know what? We'll come out in the woods, right in the garden where we're at here in Costa Rica, near a cloud forest, on the outskirts of a cloud forest. And we would try to pick a little flower that they would normally go to, and we picked one. There's a coppery-headed emerald at our flower right now. We would pick one that would normally grow in this position, that grows up above. These are tropical blueberry flowers, really important for lots of cloud forest hummingbirds in this mountain range. And we would set our camera up and go for it. And so that's what we've done here. We have a couple of flashes, and I think we're going to get some really cool stuff.
For our first attempt at this, it wasn't bad. Here's what it looks like with these values and no flash. And then we add in the flash, and it's just a whole nother thing. I love that we're getting, with 1/100th, we're getting some blur in the wings that registers kind of as a silhouette up against the cloudy, kind of bluish cloud forest sky. But then, of course, our flash is helping to sharpen things up for that one fraction of a second that the flash is going off. And also, of course, to light up the hummingbird so that we can see some of the feather details and some of the colors. So we were pretty happy with these. I really love what's going on as far as the cool shapes of the forest canopy. Not bad.
Oh, Paulo, that was a heck of a day.
It sure was.
Tiring, but I think, like pretty much every photographer, after a tiring day of cloud forest photography, there's nothing like unwinding with an eggnog and a lentil burger. It's a pretty much universal thing, right?
And yeah, I'm not sure if I would call that universal, but
rompope.
But it's awesome.
And check out our hand gel, I gotta say, XPro. It makes me feel like a pro.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool. Godox XPro transmitters, or the flash transmitters I use, so that's pretty cool. But this eggnog's good, and the lentil burgers Paulo made are awesome. But, we had a pretty cool day. We did some, I think, degree of difficulty things that were challenging, but that was fun, rather than do the same thing we always do. And I think it paid off. We got some cool hummingbird shots with wide-angle lenses. We even tried some bats, which was a half success, or half failure, depending on how you look at it.
Half success. We didn't do much in terms of quantity, but I think we got pretty good quality. And what I like the best is that we went non-traditional way.
Well, you know, I mean, that's how it is. We could have gotten a million shots doing the things we do over and over again, but trying for something different, yeah, you get fewer shots, but maybe some keepers. So what's on tap for tomorrow? We have one morning left.
Correct. We're going to keep going on with the wide-angle shots with the hummingbirds and a nice background, I understand. We're going to give it a shot again for the photos of the hummingbird from underneath. We've learned a lot from the experience today, so I believe that tomorrow is going to be a little bit easier in terms of how we set things up.
I mean, we got some good shots today.
Actually, yeah,
but I think tomorrow we'll be able to set it up even quicker.
Maybe we're going to get some blue skies tomorrow morning, so it's going to be all different.
Yeah, today it was cloudy sky, so it was kind of this, I think it was nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really nice dapple light, but it'll be interesting to see how it looks with the contrast between, you know, blue sky and vegetation and then the hummingbird in the middle.
Yeah, it could be a pretty bright sunny day, so I think we'll have to use like the AD200 again, the Godox flash that has even more power to deal with that. I think that'll be cool, and yeah, all right. Well, cheers.
Right. Cheers.
The rompope.
It was a good day.
Yeah. It's so awesome to be in a beautiful, lush cloud forest on a gorgeous morning in the tropics here in Costa Rica. I love these forests. It's cool. It's usually kind of misty and cloudy, and there's just things growing everywhere. There's leaves everywhere. There's plants. There's plants growing on top of other plants like orchids and bromeliads and ferns. Those are called epiphytes. What you don't see a whole lot of, though, is flowers. And that's the life of a hummingbird. You're in this really chaotic, lush forest, but you don't have a lot of food. And so it can be hard as a hummingbird to find your food source. That's one reason why most of them are so territorial when they do find a food source. What it means for us as photographers is two things. We have to spend a lot of time searching for that perfect flower if we're going to do hummingbird photography around a feeder setup, which is what we're doing today, at a beautiful garden place called Catarata del Toro, where they've had feeders for years and years. And this is a forest that's right on a highway. Just probably 50 feet beyond me, there's a highway there. So this isn't in the middle of a national park or anything. But we can use those feeders and place some local native flowers nearby. But since there aren't a lot of flowers, again, it makes it a little hard. So it's important for us to be able to know what kind of flower will work for the species that we want to photograph. And with a little luck, we can find. Here's a grove of central pogon flowers in a little light gap right here. These are great flowers for big hummingbirds with curved bills, such as the green hermit and the violet saberwing. So we very well might use one of these. But since these are pretty scarce and all the flowers in the forest are pretty scarce, we're only going to cut the flower we need. So I'm not going to cut this flower right now because I don't even know if we're going to use it yet. I'll only cut it in the moment we say, okay, we want to use this flower. And I'm certainly not going to cut this one and this one and this one and this one just to see what works. We're going to take our time searching for the one we really like that has just the composition. I think this one actually right here is a winner. I could see a violet saberwing coming right in here with a nice composition. And so I'm going to keep my eye on that one. And if we decide later on today that we want to use this flower, I'll come and cut it. And then after we're done, what I always like to do is most plants in the tropics, especially ones that are kind of semi-woody like this one, we can actually just stick that right back in the ground and it will grow again. And so we'll bring that back at the end of the day if we do use it, and I'll stick it right in the ground by its brethren here, and there will be more central pogon flowers for the hummingbirds later.
As usual with everything in the tropics, it's not just about one thing. So hummingbirds are not just pollinators, but they are very important propagators of an entire microecosystem that is commonly found on the flowers. Living inside the tube-shaped corollas, there are tiny mites, which are little arachnids. And as you probably know, hummingbirds are going to be taking them from flower to flower. When the hummingbird arrives to the plant, then the mites move into the hummingbird's bill, and they get firmly attached to its forehead and its chin feathers as they travel around. Together with the mites are going to be other organisms, like tiny, tiny little insects, primitive insects called hexapods or collembola, which will be traveling the same way. And even the predators of those mites, tiny pseudoscorpions, are going to be using the hummingbird as some kind of ferrying mechanism traveling from flower to flower. So nothing is simple in the tropics. Everything is very complex, and it's part of a very intricate webbing-like structure that we as photographers are trying to respect when selecting the right flower and only cutting what we need for its use in the field.
Right after we filmed that clip of Paulo where it was sunny, the clouds rolled in. So we grabbed that central pogon flower I had identified a couple clips back, and we put it to some really nice use, I think, with a green hermit over the waterfall. And we were pretty happy with these shots. There's a nice balance of ambient and flash. It's looking good. Then we moved on to another setup with another Gerania flower. Remember that cucumber family flower that I hate? And this is what it looked like with no flash. And I liked using 1/15 second for the waterfall, but look what happens with no flash and a slow shutter speed. The bird just blurs out into nothing. That's a male green hermit in there, if you can believe it. Now we added in some flash. I processed this picture a little bit, and now we have a good exposure going on, I think, if a hummingbird visits. The problem is with such a slow shutter speed, the hummingbird can just ghost out into nothing. And so what a lot of photographers will do when faced with this situation is to underexpose the picture, which I did here, add in more flash, and sure, you get a more crisply defined hummingbird, but it looks a little artificial to me. So I went back to 1/15, and you just keep going with it until you get, you know, a hummingbird that's there, but kind of not there. I much prefer this delicate balance. And even though we didn't get I think a real winner out of this, I prefer this look to the other look. But we weren't done yet. We had a couple of hours before we had to pack up, and this is what we did.
A few months ago, I had this crazy idea. What it would be like to photograph a hummingbird from underneath. You see, as if you were in the rainforest, you're walking on a trail, and suddenly you look up, and there is a hummingbird drinking from a flower that is located above you. So we're in the right spot right now, me and my pal, my friend and colleague Greg Basco. We have the hummingbirds, we have all of the gear, we have the experience, we have the hummingbirds. So we decided that we might as well give it a try. So after a few attempts, we discovered the right spot where the hummingbirds are visiting. And now I'm gonna go and check how Greg is doing. He's taking the morning shift, doing this different and challenging photography. So let's go and see Greg. What are you doing?
What? You caught me practicing my sexy posing. I was just killing some downtime while I was waiting for the hummingbird.
Well, that's what you do when I leave you alone in the woods?
We're going to edit that out, right?
No.
Actually, what I'm doing when I'm not practicing my sexy posing, I'm trying to take this picture of the hummingbird, the idea you had. And what we have going on, I'll tell you what, I'm loving the Canon 90D for this because it has a flip screen right here. And that's great. I'm lying down partly for the comedy value, but mostly because I want to keep a low profile and not scare away the hummingbirds, not be this big thing standing there or sitting there. And we forgot the right cable for our wireless remote, so we're kind of tethered by this 2-foot cable here. But what I love about this, I'm dealing with some bright sun right up above the set, which is fine, and sometimes some clouds are moving over. So the exposure in my background, the sky, is changing a little bit. So, you know, with this 90D, I can simply hit the Q button, and using the touchscreen, I can move around and change exposure as the sun changes. I'm changing just the shutter speed because what I have going on, we have the 2 flashes, an AD200 here from Godox, and a Godox V1 flash over here to put some light on the underside of the hummingbird. And I have these flashes set in manual mode because I kind of want to know the durations a little bit for some of the shots we're going to do. For some of the shots, it doesn't matter. But since the flashes are in manual mode, it means that if I adjust my ISO or my aperture, the flash exposure is going to change on the subject. I don't want that to happen. By varying only the shutter speed, that won't change. And so it's really easy with this touch screen and the flip screen where I can see it even if I'm laying down, that I can make those changes right on the fly and keep good exposures. It was also really easy for us to be able to flip the touch screen up so that we could focus and compose without killing our necks too much and trying to bend down and do all this stuff. I'm getting eaten alive by some little biting flies, but I think we're going to have success soon. There's a violet saberwing right there at our little feeder. Why don't you look at our nice flower, buddy, or not? But we'll see. Hopefully we'll be able to show you some really cool pictures from this setup.
Sweet.
We've talked a lot about how great we are at picking out flowers that bring in the hummingbirds. Well, I'll tell you what, that Columnea African violet family flower that I picked out in the previous clip did not work. It didn't bring in the hummingbirds. So we took that away. Paulo replanted it back in the forest, and we went back to our old standby, a Passiflora vidifolia, the grape-leafed passion flower. And as soon as we put that up, the hummingbirds started coming in, and this is what it looks like with no flash at 1/3200th of a second. Then we add in flash, and we really have something going on. Check out these green hermits that were coming to it. We have a nice composition. Everything's looking good. I would vary the shutter speed though. This is 1/100th of a second, so we get that mix of flash and blur. And I would vary my exposure a little bit as the sun went behind the clouds and then came out again. And at one point the sun came out. Here's a shot without flash. But then once the flash went off, we got what for me is the picture of the trip. I absolutely love this shot of a green crown brilliant. I love the framing, the mood, and the light. And I'd like to thank Godox for supporting my work. They make some great flashes. Check out the links below to my lighting gear and photo gear page. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode as much as I enjoyed shooting, editing, and producing it. I'm a little new to this, so there were some audio and video issues. I apologize for that, and it'll only get better because I'm going to keep practicing. Now, you might notice that I didn't give away all my flash secrets and detailed settings. For one thing, we just don't have time to do that in a short video, and for another thing, I need to make a living, right? So you might want to check out my new ebook, Flash for the Nature Photographer, over 350 pages, beautifully designed, beautifully laid out, that go in depth on a lot of the concepts that I touched on in this video. You can check it out at my website, deepgreenphotography.com. There's a link right below. But I really do hope you got something out of this video in terms of photo tips and a little enjoyment. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you'll be notified the next time I post a video, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Stay safe, stay healthy.